So you like CS2, do you? Well, let me ruin that for you. CS2 is so poorly created and the developers have such poor knowledge on firearms and real-world physics that not only is the creation of CS2 laughable, but I, for one, am personally offended. In our harsh political climate, and the very heated debates I get into with anti-gunners has been hindered because of the lack of realism in CS2, and now everyone thinks that they know everything about guns because they're diamond ranked or whatever in this game. Valve hates the Second Amendment and everything it stands for. Don't worry, dudes, I'm just kidding. I know this is a video game, and if you've been here before, I would hope that you know that I'm absolutely kidding here, but I was warned that the CS community would go off and be all wild in the comments, so if you want to do that, feel free to do that. But Valve does really get stuff wrong here. It's, again, just a video game, so it's fairly relevant. But I also like to use my channel as sort of an educational tool sometimes to bridge that gap between, let's say, those people that have never touched a firearm and are into video games to real-world firearms and how they function. Gun knowledge is good knowledge, and especially if you live across the salty pond, you likely have never held a real gun in your life. But they're a very cool tool and they're important to society, so let's get you educated, shall we? We're actually going to be doing some reverse engineering here with this education, because what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at Counter-Strike 2 and see what it does wrong with its weapons and certain mechanics, and explain why. If you enjoy this video, or just like guns in general, subscribe. Alright, Gray Man, let's get into it. Alright, so while you're using firearms in real life, one thing that you do, especially with a new magazine, is that you have to either rack the slide or use a charging handle to chamber a round. Basically just the mechanic that prepares a bullet to be fired out of the rifle when you pull the trigger. In CS2, every single time you change your weapon, your character does this. Every single time. And you know what happens when you do that in real life, but don't pull the trigger in between? You send an unspent round flying. That means if you continuously swap weapons 30 times with the standard M4, you will have nothing to fire at with your enemies anymore. In this case, CS2 is wrong. Let's take a look at the Glock here, because that's where we're going next. The Glock here is one of the most popular firearms in the United States. For about $500, you can grab a Glock 19 and fill it with 15 or 16 rounds and have a highly reliable sidearm to carry around every day. In the case of CS2, it's not exactly a Glock 19, it's a Glock 18, and it comes with a couple different settings. The first one is the burst fire setting. It shoots 3 rounds every time you pull the trigger. The second is very, very wrong. Take a look here. When you switch from burst fire, it says it switches to automatic fire, but this is semi-automatic, so every single time you pull the trigger, one bullet heads down range. CS2 is wrong. In real life, bullets come out of the barrel. I know, duh. This means that when you're firing a weapon, whatever the barrel is aimed at, it hits. Wild, I know. This also means that in order to shoot around a corner, you've got to make sure that the barrel of the rifle is around the corner of the building so that the bullet goes to the bad guy and doesn't get stopped by a wall. CS2 doesn't really like this idea of physics, I guess, and they like to use magic bullets because even when your rifle is behind a wall, you could shoot through the wall. CS2 is wrong. This one goes along with number 1 a little bit, but it's still a little bit different, and it's got to do with reloads. Let's say you're using an M4 here, though that's not the only weapon that it does this with. Rarely do you ever run out of bullets in CS2 and have to reload. At least, that hasn't been my experience. When you do though, you'll notice this animation. That's the correct animation because once the magazine is empty, it holds that bolt back, and when you slap it, you're sending the bolt forward to chamber a new round from a new magazine. However, every single time you load in a new magazine here, it does this animation, which is essentially useless because if the magazine wasn't empty to begin with, the bolt wouldn't be back. So hitting that bolt wouldn't do a thing. CS2 is wrong. Let's take a look at recoil, shall we? Listen, I understand recoil can be difficult to manage with some of these weapons, and I realize muscle memory comes into play when you're managing recoil in real life, but not like this. You see, the way CS2 does this, and the previous Counter-Strike titles as well, the way they handle recoil is that each weapon has a very specific pattern that it follows. If you're holding the mouse button down, you can expect the same pattern every single time. But nope, that's a lie. It is impossible to do this in real life. While some people are very good at managing recoil and keeping their shot on target, it is definitely not going to look like this every single time. CS2 is wrong. Take a look at this reload. If you are new to firearms, you learn firearm safety, and the number 1 rule of firearms is to have fun. Just kidding. Kinda. The number one rule is actually to keep your finger off the trigger until you're ready to fire. This helps prevent things like negligent discharges and shooting your friends in the back. Obviously, this guy didn't get the message because while he's reloading these double Berettas and some other weapons, he's got his finger on the trigger the entire time. Not recommended here. CS2 is wrong. In real life, when you're utilizing an optic, the bullet should go where the red dot is, depending on how far you've zeroed the optic in for, of course. Even when you're shooting and the reticle is bouncing, most of the high-quality reticles are created to be accurate regardless of what angle you're looking through them at. Now let's pull up CS2's method. The AUG, let's say. While you're just firing a bullet or two at a time, sure, the bullets go right where the reticle is pointed. However, if you hold down that mouse button for some full auto action, no bueno. These bullets are going everywhere and definitely not where the reticle is. CS2 is wrong. Now here's something they really messed up with CS2 because the old Counter-Strikes do this, and in this one, it's just not correct. In rifles, you'll see that the spent casings get ejected every single time the weapon fires. That's exactly what's supposed to happen for a majority of firearms anyway. However, let's grab us a shotgun here. Any shotgun, really. You notice something? No shells get ejected during the shot or the pump action. Somebody forgot to program that in. CS2 is wrong. Okay, so these last two aren't exactly firearms related, but they are a game's mechanic that makes zero sense. Something you should know about smoke grenades here. There are no smoke grenades that just go poof and cover a whole area. Call of Duty might do that, CS2 might do that, Valorant might do that, but the way smoke grenades actually work is they have to burn a special compound inside of them, and then they release smoke into the atmosphere that covers the area, and if it's windy, that smoke goes away pretty quickly. In CS2, well, they do this. CS2 is wrong. I know, you're a strong guy. I'm sure you're currently in your seat lifting super heavy Cheetos and maybe even moving around in your rolly chair for a bit of exercise, but I bet you're still not as strong and balanced as the players in CS2. There are several levels in CS2 where you can flank your enemies from above and get to these places with a ladder. In the game, your character must be a big beefy macho man because he's got both hands on his rifle, he can climb ladders, and still zoom in if he's got an optic. Physics makes this impossible, but CS2 makes it possible. CS2 is wrong. Okay, gamers, that wraps this one up. I really hope you enjoyed it. I know it's a bunch of silly stuff, and I don't really care. Again, it's a video game. It's just a little fun video to be a little bit educational and a nitpick because, you know, I like to nitpick. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like. If you didn't, give it a dislike. Subscribe for more, and until the next one, be bold, be courageous, stay gray.